What's going on, YouTube? So today I wanted to do my predictions heading into Week 10 of the 2015 college football season. So last week I went 18-2, so that brings me a total record of 127.53. So pretty good week for me last week. If I had actually just gone with my gut and just not predicted an upset of the week, which is not my style, then probably would have been 19-1. But I decided to take Clemson losing to NC State, and that was a bad decision. But you know what? New week, I went 18-2, my best record so far. So yeah, this will be a special 30-game prediction special. Just said special twice. But I'm going to go through 3 games in particular a little bit further in depth this week, just because I'm going to have to roll through these predictions real quickly just because I've got 30 games to predict. So this is the biggest week of college football so far, in my opinion, and also I think that's just a fact. So the 3 biggest games of the week are Clemson, Florida State, which will probably decide the ACC, Oklahoma State, TCU, which is the biggest game to this point in the Big 12, and then LSU and Bama, obviously maybe the biggest game of the season to date. So go ahead and start with my first game, which is Northern Illinois and Toledo. So I've got Toledo in this game. This could be I wouldn't say a trap game, but a game that Toledo could be upset. Northern Illinois is a good team. I believe Toledo has to go on the road, but I do still think they'll take care of it. They are the best team in the MAC, in my opinion, by far. So, move on to Baylor and Kansas State. So this is going to be a big test for Baylor, just to see how well they respond, or how well they will respond to the Seth Russell injury. So Jarrett Stidham gets his first start. I believe they are going to Manhattan. I have to check up on that, but Baylor should still be favored. They are favored by only 17. It's either 17 or 17.5, and I think they should be favored by a little bit more, but yes, they do have to go to Manhattan. So, big test, but I still think the Baylor will win this. So, move on to Mississippi State and Mizzou. So, 2 teams, 2 decent teams, about sitting in the same position in their divisions. Mizzou looks like they'll finish the year in the lower middle tier of the SEC East, so kind of falling off a little bit after 2 straight SEC East titles. And then Mississippi State, not really in title contention for the SEC West, but definitely in a good position to end up in a solid bowl game. I think they'll take care of the game this weekend and move up to 7-2. So move on to Vanderbilt in Florida. So I don't think this game will be even close. I think it's the best team versus the worst team in the SEC East, and I think that Florida will take care of this game, no problem. So move on to Kentucky and Georgia. I don't think this will be a very fun game to watch. 2 teams that have a lot of trouble scoring points, and 2 teams that have not looked very good in the last few weeks that started off the season pretty well. So I think that Georgia's going to win this just because of the pure fact of how much more talent they have than Kentucky. Not much more to that. So move on to Duke and North Carolina. So this is a huge game in the ACC Coastal. North Carolina is favored by about 9 points. I think that they'll win, maybe not by that much. Just Duke, Duke's been a solid team this year, but also whenever they played a good team, then it normally is a very close game. And they do have to go to Chapel Hill, which I don't know how much that matters, just because the 2 teams are so close. It's a rivalry game, but I do think that North Carolina will still come out on top, and I think they'll end up clinching the ACC Coastal. So move on to Notre Dame and Pitt. So 2 teams that were on the opposite ends of the spectrum last week in terms of winning and losing. Pitt had a tough loss to North Carolina, and then Notre Dame had a close win against Temple. So I think that Notre Dame will win this game. It could be an entertaining game depending on how Pittsburgh turns out. Both their losses have been close games, good games against good teams. So I think they'll put up a fight, but Notre Dame will end up winning. So move on to Texas Tech and West Virginia. I think this could be a very entertaining game, actually. So Texas Tech's home games have been very entertaining this year. Their away games, not so much. They don't play very well on the road. And while West Virginia's defense isn't great, I think they're still a decent defense in the upper echelon of the Big 12. And Texas Tech does, like I said, very much struggle on the road. Pat Mahomes, not the same quarterback on the road that he is at home. Texas Tech's defense just got thrashed for 70 points last week, and that was at home. Granted, I think they play the same way at home that they do on the road. They're bad either way. And you know what? West Virginia's offense can put up points when they have to when they're facing a weak defense. And I think that's what they're going to do this week. I think it'll be an entertaining game, a shootout, but I think West Virginia will end up winning this in the end. West Virginia has a very favorable schedule to finish out the year. They've already played pretty much the only teams they've lost to in the Big 12 are the Big 4. They've lost to Baylor, they've lost to TCU, they've lost to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and a few of the games, they gave Baylor a pretty good game, and then Oklahoma State was a very tight game as well, but I believe they only had one of those games at home. So, yeah, a good chance for West Virginia to take advantage of having the home field advantage in Morgantown. All right, so move on to Penn State and Northwestern. So this could be a very good battle between two middle upper tier teams in the Big Ten. No team really neither of these teams really competing for a spot in the Big Ten title game now. But I do think that Penn State will win this game. It should be an entertaining game, a close game. I think it will be a low-scoring game as well. So move on to Stanford and Colorado. So Colorado gave UCLA quite a run for their money last weekend. I think that Stanford is not. I don't think they're the same team on the road they are at home. So they are still a very good team, but I think they ran into a very tough test against a good Wazoo team that's very good at home and a hot quarterback in Luke Falk. So I think that Stanford will win this game. I don't think it'll be near as close as a lot of people think. I do think the game's in Boulder. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it'll end up being a blowout. So move on to Virginia and Miami. So Virginia has to go on the road to play a Miami team that had probably the most exciting finish to a game that I've seen in a while. Granted, it probably should have never happened, but you know what? They won. They move on to 5-3, and they get a much needed win after what happened to them against against Clemson. So I think that Miami will win this game just because of the pure fact of how bad Virginia is on the road. And yeah, move on to Cincinnati and Houston. So I think that Houston's going to win this game flat out. I think it's pretty simple. Cincinnati is a good team, but Houston's just been on fire the last couple of weeks. Just destroyed Vanderbilt last week. And I think they'll move closer to having a good ranking and good positioning heading into the big game against Memphis. So move on to Florida State and Clemson. So like I said, I'm going to preview this is one of my 3 big games of the weekend, like 3 huge games of the weekend. So I'll preview it more later. But yeah, so if you do want to see my winner of this game, then you're going to have to go check out the other video. I will be posting this one tomorrow. I will be posting the Oklahoma State TCU on Tuesday, and then the Alabama and LSU on Wednesday. If I'm feeling nice and feel like doing it a little bit ahead of time, then I might do all 3 tomorrow. But like I said, I'll put the links somewhere in the description below, and as time goes on, you'll be able to see all 3 videos. So move on to Iowa and Indiana. So I think that Iowa's going to win this game. They are. You know what? I honestly think they're a really good team. They have a chance to upset either Ohio State or Michigan State, whoever they play in the Big Ten Championship. But I think this is going to be a tough test for them. The line is only Iowa by 7. Indiana hasn't been great in the last couple of weeks, but I think that they could turn out a little bit better than they have in the last couple of weeks in this game this weekend. So, like I said, I do still think Iowa's going to win. So move on to Rutgers and Michigan. I don't think this is even going to be a contest. I think that Michigan's finally going to get all this poison out that almost caused them to lose to Minnesota, and then did cause them to lose in that last second loss to Michigan State. So like I said, I think they're going to win huge. I think the game is at Rutgers, but either way, big game at the Big House or at Rutgers, I think that Michigan's going to win by a lot. So move on to Arkansas and Ole Miss. So 2 teams that I think are headed in the right direction right now. Ole Miss was able to ink out a win against Auburn, and Arkansas was able to put up a lot of points on an FCS team, Tennessee Martin, last week. So I think that Arkansas will put up a game, and I think Ole Miss is going to end up winning in the end. Now, if you guys saw the game last year, Arkansas just out of nowhere completely dominated what was I believe a number 2 ranked Ole Miss team at one point, and shut them out 30-0. So who knows? Arkansas could still be the thorn in Ole Miss's side. This is a game to definitely watch this weekend. And if Arkansas can beat Ole Miss, then I don't think Ole Miss has much of a shot at an SEC West title anymore, and that'll give Arkansas a good position, or put Arkansas in a good position finishing out the season, bring them closer to bowl eligibility. So move on to South Carolina and Tennessee. So South Carolina actually did put up a pretty good fight against A&M last weekend after getting just, I believe, who they played the week before that? I don't know. Anyway, South Carolina did look decent last weekend. Quarterback Perry Orth didn't look great, but South Carolina's had a lot of trouble with the quarterback position this year. Just hasn't looked like a very put together team. It's been a team in chaos this year after Spurrier retired, and I think they're doing the best they can. But a team like South Carolina, I don't think Tennessee is going to have any problem with. Teams that Tennessee should beat and know they can beat and know it's not going to be a close game is not a problem for Tennessee. I can compare the games like maybe a game like Alabama compared to a game like Kentucky. I think that South Carolina is more in the Kentucky region, and Tennessee just absolutely derailed Kentucky 52-21 last weekend. And I think if Tennessee could get over that whole or get that monkey off their back, then I think they could easily be 8-0 up to this point, but they can't, and they're 4-4. So I think that Tennessee will move to 5-4. They will finally have a maybe an 8-win season this year, and hopefully keep heading in the right direction. So move on to Arizona and USC. So I believe this is the last game of the weekend, I want to say. Could be an entertaining game. I don't know much of what to think about Arizona. Just a tough year for them. A lot of injuries. Scooby Wright has been playing with some injury all season. There's been multiples. He had the ankle, then I believe he had an MCL problem, I want to say, and then a wrist problem also. There might be more, who knows. But Anu Solomon's had trouble with concussions. So it's not been a great season for Arizona. Granted, I think they'll still reach bowl eligibility. Not as good as I thought they would be this year, especially with how good they finished out. Well, just how good they were last year. They didn't finish out the season great, but I think the USC is going to win this game. USC is starting to put it together with 2 big wins now against Utah and California. So I think they'll win this week and take another step to another step towards maybe even winning the Pac-12 South. So move on to California and Oregon. So again, 2 teams headed in opposite directions. Oregon barely squeaked out. I believe it was a 61-55 triple overtime victory against Arizona State. And Cal lost a somewhat close game to USC. I think that Cal's going to win this game. I just think they're a little bit too good for Oregon still. Oregon has been able to ink out a few good victories. I believe they've won 2 or 3 in a row now. But I do think the Cal, 2 in a row. So I think the Cal's going to end that winning streak for Oregon and end their own losing streak. So move on to LSU and Alabama. So my third big game that I will predict this week. And like I said, for the Clemson Florida State game, I'll make another video for that. So move on to Minnesota and Ohio State. So JT Barrett suspended for this game because of a DUI. I think that if anything, that'll just cause Minnesota to be able to beat the spread. I don't think that Minnesota has the ability to win this game. They're just outmatched too much talent-wise against a team is just as good as Ohio State. So, like I said, I think Ohio State will not run away too much with this one, but will at least win handily. So move on to Utah and Washington, and actually right now Washington is favored in this game. The game is in Seattle, which I think it'll be a close game. Utah has not looked like the same team since that loss to USC. They had a close win against Oregon State. Granted, it looked a lot better than the score showed, but still, when you play one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 and only beat them by 15, it's not great. So I think that Utah will win this game, start getting back on track a little bit more. I think Devontae Booker will have a huge game despite how good Washington's defense is. And I think Utah's defense is definitely getting back on track after just looking outmatched against USC. So move on to Auburn and Texas A&M. So 2 disappointing teams this year. So A&M looked good the first couple weeks, managed to get themselves inside the top 10, and then just got beat 2 weeks in a row. So they managed to get back inside the top 25 this week after a 7-point win against South Carolina. And I think they'll win again this weekend just because of how hopeless Auburn just looks every week. Sean White does give that offense a little bit more than Jeremy Johnson did because, I mean, if you guys saw the last pass Jeremy Johnson had against Ole Miss, then it kind of just described his season. I don't think there's been a quarterback worse for his team in college football this year than Jeremy Johnson. I just think it's been a rough year for him. There's not much else to say for that. So I think A&M will win, and I think they'll move up a little bit in the top 25. So move on to Iowa State and Oklahoma. So Iowa State actually had a big win against Texas last week. And if you want to technically draw things out, say that Oklahoma lost by 7 to Texas, Iowa State beat Texas by 24, then Iowa State could be 31-point favorites in this game. That's just not how college football works. So I do think that Iowa State's going to lose this game by a lot. I don't think they'll be fully prepared for an Oklahoma team that has looked very good at home this year and just absolutely terrifyingly good ever since they lost to Texas. So I think that they'll win this game by at least 30 and send Iowa State back a little bit worse than they are doing right now. So move on to my 25th game of the week. Navy and Memphis, so I think this will be a huge game, and this moves on to my first upset of the week pick. So I think that Navy is going to end up winning this game. I think they'll be able to step up on the big stage against Memphis. I think they play on the road, but still, Navy, I mean, they've looked pretty good this season aside from one loss to a very good Notre Dame team. I'm not trying to take anything away from Memphis. They've looked fantastic this season. But I think they're going to trip up a little bit the week before they have to, actually I think it's, yeah, the week before they have to go play Houston. So this is definitely a trap game for me. If Memphis even somewhat tries to pass up preparing for the option against Navy, then their defense is just going to get demolished. So move on to UCLA and Oregon State. So Oregon State did put up a pretty good fight against Utah last week, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that against UCLA. Josh Rosen kind of had an inconsistent week last week, so I think that, or kind of a rough week last week, so I think he's going to have a pretty good week this week. That's just the way he's trending this season. So move on to Oklahoma State and TCU, and the third game of my big three games that I will predict in a different video. Again, like I've said 2 times already, link will be in the description below for that video. So move on to Wisconsin and Maryland. So Maryland, just rough week last week against Iowa. It just describes Maryland's season. I think that they're going to kind of have the same week they had last week. Threw an interception in the red zone, which kind of gave away their last chance to win the game. And Wisconsin's honestly looked pretty good ever since that loss to Iowa. So I think that they're going to be able to win this game. It is on the road, but the fight that Maryland had against Penn State, I think that was just a one-game thing. So move on to Arizona State and Washington State. I think that Washington State's going to win this game just because they have it at home. If they can almost beat Stanford, then I think that they can beat Arizona State. Simple as that. And then my last game of the 30 is Arkansas State and Appalachian State. So I think this game will decide the Sun Belt. Obviously, you still have the championship game, but I do think these are the 2 best teams in the Sun Belt right now. So Arkansas State 5-3, Appalachian State 8-1, either 7-1, 8-1, either way. I don't think Appalachian State is as good as their record suggests. It just took a little too much for them to beat Troy. They got walloped by Clemson earlier this year, which is really the only decent team they played so far. Granted, they do have the talent to put up a lot of points. They are maybe the most talented team in the Sun Belt, but that might be the worst conference in all of college football. So I think that App State's going to win this game. They do have it at home, and Arkansas State has not looked good against good teams this year. So just take it back to the USC game, for example. I think that Arkansas State can put up a good fight. I think if Appalachian State is actually able to put up a decent score this week, then that'll be able to be enough for them to sneak into the top 25 this week if some of the lower teams in the top 25 end up losing. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Actually, one more thing about the App State game. Okay, actually, never mind. So yeah, like I said, I think App State's going to be able, I don't know if they'll be able to cover the spread of 11.5, but I think they'll be able to win that game. So like I said, 3 games: Oklahoma State, TCU, LSU, Alabama, and then Clemson and Florida State will be done in separate videos just because of how many games I did predict this week. And hopefully I have a good record, as good as the one last week. But I think it could be a crazy good week in college football. Really entertaining. I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah.